right? Okay. So, my apologies. We are a bit late today. It's primarily because of the Sawan. A lot of traffic is there, and we got calls from a lot of colleagues who are still stuck in the traffic. And honestly, we need to respect everybody's time. So we felt like let us start. We know that at least 3 or 4 times compared to the people who are right now inside the room are actually they have joined us virtually. So let us not make them wait. And thank you, all of you, for joining us today. My name is Atin. I work with the Center for Science and Environment. We are part of the unit that deals with solid waste management and circular economy. So I'll just try to give you all a very brief context to the agenda and the entire event. Um, as you all know that urban India generates about 1.6 lakh tons of waste every single day. It's just the urban because India has roughly about 5,000 ULBs compared to 250,000 gram panchayats, which is that number is not accounted here. It's just the urban solid waste that I'm talking about. Now, according to our standard and estimation, roughly about 10 to 12% is considered to be plastic. We have done some characterization time to time, not at a national scale, but that is basically what basically we figured out. So if we apply this 12% on this entire number, it comes about it is about some 19,500 tons of plastic that basically we produce every single day. Now, according to the latest data, we have more than 3,000 MRF, which are design capacity of 72,500 tons. But this is not just plastic. This is the entire spectrum of dry waste, which has paper, metal, glass, and many other streams. Now, what is very interesting is that of all the plastic waste that we produce, about 50 to 60% alone are packaging plastic, right? And how are they different from the other form of plastic? The packaging plastics are something that have a very short shelf life. So let's say I am selling a food item packaged in a plastic container. That item enters the market, goes to the consumer uses it, and then the package becomes waste. So that is what I mean by the shelf life. Now, if you compare this idea to the other form of plastics like electrical, electronic, agriculture, health, education, railway, transport, aviation, you just name it, right? So there also we are using millions of tons of plastic, but the shelf life of those items are probably 20, 30, 100, 200 times longer. So that is not really a problem that basically we deal with every day. Now, why plastic is the most preferred form of packaging is primarily because it's cheap, it's durable, it's almost indestructible. So brands and businesses prefer plastic over other material for the primary choice, the first choice for using it as a packaging material. Now, in the last 4 or 5 years, Center for Science and Environment as an organization, we have built capacity of 460 plus ULBs from 31 states and union territories. And in this journey, what we learned that an average Indian ULB, so when we say ULB, it could be anything from a town panchayat to big municipal corporations like Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, Kolkata. They spend anything between 30 to 60% of their annual ULB budget only for solid waste management. So this is exactly where the cost is very, very significant and important agenda for our discussion. And out of the entire solid waste management budget, just about 2/3 of it, like anything between 60 to 70% alone, is spent on waste collection, because that is where most of the money is spent. If I just try to throw some number, some ballpark figure, that cost can range anything between 1,000 rupees to 3,000 rupees, depending on the whether it is a plain land, flat surface, or it is hilly terrain. Because in hilly terrains, it is the cost of waste collection is many times higher than the plain land. Now, the question is that why cost is so important agenda for us to discuss today? Because unless the ecosystem, the solid waste management ecosystem is financially sustainable, economically sustainable, with the increased population and increased burden on the urban local government, it will be it will be even more challenging going forward. Now, who usually pays for waste management, if I may say? So the urban local bodies, from the money that they receive from their state authorities, Government of India. We know that in 1992, we had two major constitutional reforms, the 73rd and the 74th Amendment, which also gave birth to the Central Finance Committee and the State Finance Committee, which is a mechanism to redistribute the revenues that either Government of India or state governments were collecting and channelize them back to the rural local government and urban local government so that they can function as an independent unit of governance. They have the elected representative, they can plan independently and they can implement independently. The 11th schedule lists out the delegated responsibilities, and one of such responsibilities is solid waste management. Now, around this time, in February 2022, the extended producer responsibility regime was introduced, right? We all know about EPR, so I don't need to tell you. It's primarily to hold the businesses responsible who were using plastic as a primary packaging material, because the spectrum, the application of EPR is limited to only plastic packaging material, plastic packaging waste, not the other form of waste, as I mentioned earlier, like in other sector. So what we wanted to understand that the burden of waste management is very heavy on the local government. It is very heavy on the citizens and the bulk waste generators and all other waste generators for that matter. So what we wanted to understand that while EPR is an accountability and financing mechanism, how EPR is able to finance plastic waste management as compared to the amount that the urban local bodies are having to spend on plastic waste management. Now, calculating the cost of waste management is a very difficult task in itself. And then we are trying to further drill down to a single waste stream, which is plastic, because municipal solid is the gamut of waste has many other streams. Like, so it was a very difficult math, very complex math that we had to do. So that is exactly what we attempted to do. And I'm sure that the outcome of this event, coupled with the findings of the study, would be greatly beneficial and contributing to reform and reshape the EPR regime, which is still at a very nascent stage going forward. We are privileged to be joined by a pool of wonderful panelists, and they can intersect and literally give us an overview of the findings of the study. They can reflect on the findings of the study, as well as they can also compare it with the existing financing mechanism with EPR. We also know that right now a global plastic treaty negotiation is going on, led by the United Nations Environment Program. We had several rounds of negotiation, but we are yet to have the treaty. Hopefully, we'll have it sooner. So in the treaty as well, financing plastic waste management is a big agenda. So I would expect the esteemed panelists and speakers to reflect on that. So the two authors, Dr. Tribhuvan Singh Bist, my colleague, and my colleague Siddharth Singh, basically they produced this report, and you will hear them sharing the findings and insights. We'll take questions in between. I'll request my colleagues to put the agenda in the chat box for the virtual participants. The people who are inside the room definitely may have received a copy already. So we'll take questions. We'd like to make it as interactive as possible without overshooting the time. And so let me just leave the floor now and invite my wonderful friend and colleague Swati to deliver the keynote address. And before that, let me also introduce Swati to all of you. I mean, she is someone who doesn't need an introduction, but this is just a format of the event that will follow. So Swati is the principal expert pollution at Grid Arendal, a non-profit environmental foundation established in 1989 in Arendal, Norway, where she works on plastic pollution, circular economy, and just transition. As part of her work, she supports Africa and Asia Pacific region in developing inclusive data-driven strategies for plastics and marine litter reduction. Swati is a recognized voice in the global plastic treaty process and advocates for equitable, community-led just solutions to environmental challenges. With over 14 years, Swati, maybe this number is not correct, so please correct us later on. With over 14 years of experience, he brings technical and policy expertise from roles with UN Habitat, UNEP, World Bank, University of Georgia, and the Center for Science and Environment. So she is one of us, like she has worked with CSE in the past. So thank you, Swati, so much. I leave you the floor and you may please come over and make your presentation.
Thank you so much, CSE. Is it fine? Okay, yeah.
Oh, CSE.
So thank you so much, Atin, for that introduction, and good morning, everyone. A bit delay in the schedule because of what's happening in Delhi with rains and the Kavar Yatra, but no worries. But yeah, so can I continue? That's okay? Yeah. So yeah, we all are finally here, both in person and online. And yeah, a big thank you to Atin, colleagues at CSE, for having me over here. It's always a pleasure to be back at CSE, which, as you all know, is an important institution that has played a very pertinent role in some, shaping some robust environmental policies in the country, and also for shaping some of our professional journeys. And I stand here also as a proud alumni. So I feel the title of today's event, Cost of Compliance, Plastic Circularity in Indian Cities, is particularly timely. And I think the program has framed the issue very well, which is how much are Indian cities actually spending to manage plastic waste? And are local governments able to leverage EPR to pay for it? This is something, which has been going on since a while, extended producer responsibility. And of course, there've been a lot of discourse and discussions on this, but very often we miss the minute details. So thanks to colleagues at CSE for putting out some very substantial work and case studies up front. I want to use my few minutes today to take this question slightly further, because I feel that the question is not only what does plastic circularity cost, but it is also who is currently paying that cost, who is doing the work, and who ultimately receives the money. And those three questions, they do not always have the same answer as what we see when we are on the ground. When we talk about circularity, we often talk about tons, which is tons collected, tons recycled, tons diverted, tons disposed. But behind every ton is a system, which is someone is collecting that plastic, someone is segregating it, someone is sorting it, someone is aggregating it, transporting it, and processing it. And therefore, circularity is not just one activity, it is an entire value chain. My intention not here is an address, but to leave behind some questions, which probably Siddharth will and other colleagues will take over. So if we want that value chain to work, every essential actor in it has to be economically viable. And this sounds obvious, but our financing system doesn't always work that way. I looked into the CSE study, which is being discussed today, and it makes it very evident. It does something very useful, which is instead of starting with what an EPR certificate costs, it starts with what waste management actually costs. And it looks at the real economic burden of managing plastic packaging waste and compares this with both CPCB recommended EPR rates and the rates observed in the market. And that distinction between price and cost is extremely important. I don't think so. We have enough evidence on it, and probably with this report, we have a first mover advantage of revealing what is this. Because the market may tell us the price of an EPR certificate, but that does not necessarily tell us the cost of circularity. And the differences are extremely striking. So, deriving it from the study, it shows significant variation in the cost of managing plastics across Indian cities. What we see is that geography matters, infrastructure matters, and transport distance matters. And also the type of plastic matters. For instance, a hill city like Shimla cannot necessarily collect and transport plastic at the same cost as a large metropolitan like Delhi NCR, or an Andaman and Nicobar cannot manage its waste at the same cost as a city which is connected to larger recycling markets, for instance, a Chennai. And yet, our financing architecture can sometimes behave as though a kilogram of plastic costs exactly the same to recover everywhere, all across India. But that is not the case. This is why I feel that CSE's recommendations to consider geographic and cost-based adjustments to EPR is interesting. I also feel there's a larger principle here, which is if we want to finance circularity, finance has to follow the real cost of circularity. And these are probably important interventions, not the cheapest certificate available in a market, not an assumed national average, but the real costs. So there's a second issue that I think is even more important, which is that finance also needs to follow the people who actually perform the service. And at present, we see there's a wider disconnect. Think about what that means, which is a municipality may finance collection, a waste picker may recover the material, an aggregator may sort and consolidate it, and a transporter may move it thousands of kilometers away to some center. But the financial value associated with compliance may materialize much further down the chain. So we really need to ask ourselves, are we financing circularity? Or are we financing the last measurable transaction in circularity? Because they are really not the same thing. And this is particularly important for countries such as India, where we all know the informal sector has been the backbone of material recovery for decades. Waste pickers are not waiting for us to invent circular economy with a magic wand. It is their lived reality past many decades. And the CSE analysis notes exactly this problem, which is that waste pickers and aggregators provide an important recycling service, but they remain outside EPR benefits, often working under hazardous conditions. I'm sure you all know of that, and I may not have to elaborate on that aspect. So when we talk about EPR reforms, I would argue that we need to move from simply asking who can generate a credit to asking who created the environmental value represented by that credit. And that is a much more interesting question to answer and look into. And last but not the least, this conversation in India also has a direct connection to the global discourses on plastics that is happening at the moment. And we are, of course, at a very important point in the negotiations for a global legally binding instrument on plastic pollution. We all know that, and if you not know, for your information, the chair released the new 8.2 negotiations on 8th of August. And it is important to be clear that this is an informal reference document. It's not negotiated or agreed text. This is intended to help structure discussions ahead of INC 5.4 with the next informal heads of delegation meeting. But what is interesting for today's conversation in the architecture emerging in that document is that we see plastic waste management, EPR, just transition, and financing sitting alongside one another. And under the current 8.2 negotiations, Article 7 on plastic waste management, it includes the establishment of systems and infrastructure at national and subnational levels, circular economy approaches, collection and recycling targets, and development of EPR or other economic instruments, importantly, while taking into account the different roles of relevant stakeholders. So that's something interesting to note. We also have a separate Article 9 on just transition. And I find the language here particularly relevant to today's discussion, which is it explicitly refers to decent work, opportunities, livelihoods, and crucial protection, and to engage workers in both formal and informal sectors, also including waste pickers. And immediately following that is the Article 10, which is on financial resources and mechanisms. And the current text envisages a mechanism for financial resources which are adequate, accessible, new, predictable, and timely. So I feel there is a larger need to read these articles together than separately, because just transition without financing risks becomes an aspiration. And financing without a just transition lens risks reinforcing the inequalities which are already present in our waste systems. For the global treaty, therefore, the debate cannot only be how much money will be mobilized. It's been an important part of the discussions around financial mechanisms. Of course, that matters enormously, and it really affects countries individually, regionally, and wholly. But we all know that developing countries would need finance, technology, infrastructure, also institutional capacity and reforms to implement an ambitious treaty. So the questions probably that needs to be asked at a global discourse level is on financial mechanisms is that once this money reaches a country, where would this go? Does it reach cities? Does it strengthen collection systems? Does it help municipalities to cover the real costs that they're carrying? Or does it reach waste picker organizations and cooperatives? Does it support MSMEs or micro, small, and medium enterprises? Or does it finances reuse and repair systems? Or does it helps workers to transition where certain products or practices are phased out? Or does most of it end up financing large infrastructure and actors that already have access to capital? So who is the right owner of these financial mechanisms that are being discussed? So this distinction will determine whether the plastics treaty delivers a just transition in practice rather than simply referring to one in text. What we, of course, see in the current text that is being shared is that there have been some elements of dilution, but I'm not here to discuss that today. I would therefore leave behind three principles for financing plastic circularity, and a lot of it is, of course, derived from reading the report that CSE and colleagues have come out with. First, finance the entire value chain, not simply the endpoint. Second, pay for real costs and real outcomes. We all know that the purpose of EPR is not to make producers' compliance as inexpensive as possible. Its purpose is to shift responsibility and accountability and create an economic condition which is necessary to prevent pollution and build circular systems. And third is to make equity measurable. If we say a system supports a just transition, we should be able to demonstrate it. And what proportion of EPR finance reaches municipalities? Are women waste workers being benefited? Are smaller cities receiving adequate financing? So these are some of the pertinent questions that we all must be asking. There's also one final point, which is that circularity is not achieved simply when plastic is moving from one part of the economy to another. Circularity works when responsibilities, costs, and values move with it. I leave with these thoughts here, and I hope over the rest of the day we'll continue with these discussions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Swati. It couldn't get any better. Thank you for leaving us with a very pertinent question and also reflecting on the report that will be unfolding very soon. It's time to invite one of the co-authors of the report, Siddharth, my colleague. So Siddharth is a program manager at the Center for Science and Environment and has a master's degree in green technology from the Institute of Chemical Technology, Mumbai. With more than 12 years in solid waste management, he previously co-founded a social enterprise for organic waste in Mumbai at CSE. He focuses on plastic pollution, leading initiative that involves research, advocacy, and capacity building in India and the global south. He has participated in various government committees shaping plastic waste management policies and closely monitoring ongoing global plastic treaty negotiations led by the UNEP. So, thank you, Sid. Over to you.
Thank you, Atin. Thanks, Tribhuvan. I will keep it short. What I'm going to speak about is, mostly how plugged in we have been in the entire EPR shaping up in the country. And I mean, we are in 2026. This is, it's not that EPR happened overnight in the country, right? If we look at the genesis of how EPR was introduced in the country, the first time in 2016 rules, plastic waste management rules, we found a mention of EPR, right? And from there, in 2020, we had the uniform framework, which presented, all the stakeholders with three different models. Finally, we had the draft in 21, October 21, and the current legislation was notified in February 2022, right? We have been plugged in right from August 2020, when we found that, the policymakers are thinking about uh, developing something like this. Now, the good thing is that EPR itself, as it was notified in 2022, has been amended as many as 9 times, right? With the most recent amendment happening in January 2025 on marking and labeling. Uh, and there were a lot of I would say advancement in terms of looking at environmental compensation in a lot more detail. We'll talk about what exactly that means. But when we had the first policy in 2022, these were the key questions that we were asking, right? Some of these questions we were able to answer through the two reports that we published in 2024, and some of these answers took a lot more time than we imagined, and through this report we are also trying to answer those questions. So first, we wanted to understand, what does the policy say, right? What is the EPR policy all about, and how is it intended to fold out on the ground? The second thing we wanted to understand is, okay, because we do understand that, India, and for that matter, even Southeast Asia, we are a champion of policies, but implementation is where we really struggle, right? So we also wanted to look at, what is the policy saying, what is happening on the ground, what are people doing, what are stakeholders doing. uh, the third thing that we wanted to understand is, what are the quantums of different categories that fall in the scope of EPR, right? Do we have enough recycling capacity at the end of all of it to take care of it within the country, right? Because we also know that a lot of waste still is imported into the country. So are we self-sufficient, right, in terms of how much we are putting on the market and how much are we able to recycle or process at the end of all of it? Uh, these were all answered in 2024, right? Then we wanted to understand, how much does plastic recycling actually cost? And when I say recycling, I'm not really talking about how much is a plastic waste recycler spending. I'm talking about how much money does it take to bring the plastic waste from a plastic generator, waste generator, to the plastic recycling or processing facility, right? Because there's a value chain. And then we also were questioning the whole approach of geography agnosticity that we have embedded in the EPR system. Now, before we move ahead, there are two things that I want everyone to understand. And this is also, I mean, people in the room and those of you who have joined online, we all understand that there is a value chain, right? There is a solid waste management value chain. Plastic, in our context, is part of that solid waste management value chain. Right now, anywhere you go in the world, an EPR system is always built on your existing value chain. If you have a non-functional value chain, you can't build an EPR, right? So that is the first thing that I want people to keep in mind as we move ahead. So in order to build an EPR policy, we need to understand this value chain very clearly, right? And this is how it looks for any average Indian city, right? Because we are a diverse country, we are a big country. So I mean, if you tweak here and there, you can build models for even gram panchayats or even for smaller tier 2, tier 3 cities, right? So if this is again the phraseology that has been used in the law itself. It basically stands for producers, importers, and brand owners. Manufacturers are also covered in the EPR policy, right? So a manufacturer is any plant that is using crude oil as a raw material and making plastic pellets or plastic powder or plastic paste, which can then be used by producers to make different kind of products. And then these products are bought by brand owners, right, who use them as their packaging material. This eventually, the product and the packaging reach us, who is the user, and then from there the waste journey really starts, which a part of it goes to informal sector, a part of it goes to formal sector, a part of it also reaches dump sites or landfills, and from there it goes through junk shops, MRFs, and eventually into recycling plants or plastic waste processing plants like waste to energy plants, cement co-processing plants, waste to oil plants, etc., etc. Now, EPR, like I said, is built onto this value chain, right? We have at one extreme end what we can call the polluters, because EPR is also based on the principle of polluter pays. So people who are introducing these packaging materials, because that is the scope of EPR, are at one end of this scheme, and at the other end are plastic waste processors, right? Now, if you look at, I mean, it's a very busy slide, but let me try and simplify it for you. These stakeholders are supposed to register with the regulator. Here is the regulator, right? And basis the information that is provided by these stakeholders, they in turn get targets for collection, for recycling, for use of recycled content, for reuse, depending on their product portfolio. At the other end of this value chain, these people again are supposed to register with the regulator. This regulator could be a state level regulator, and in turn, for their registration, they get licenses to generate certificates, right? Now, depending on the amount of certificates they are able to generate, these certificates are then traded between the PBOs and the PWPs in exchange of a payment, right? And this payment is it's a mutually decided amount. Because when EPR was introduced, we were told that it is a market-based mechanism, right? The market will decide for itself how much should the polluter pay and how much should a recycler make. What happened and this was like what was proposed in the very first notification. And what happened is we overlooked very key stakeholders like urban local bodies, gram panchayats, informal sector, right? Who were also, I mean, I would say, doing most of the heavy lifting, right? Uh, Over the years, I mean, a lot of organizations engaged with the policymakers, and finally now we have a way for the local governments also to become a part of our EPR regime and also generate some revenue from it, right? We will also be talking about that. But this is more or less, how EPR works in our country. It is about people who are putting plastic packaging on the market. It is about people who are able to recycle. The recyclers or processors generate certificates and which are sold to the polluters, and in return they get a payment. And this is how it works. Now, a few things that we have to keep in mind before again we go into the details where Tribhuvan will take us into a lot more depth. I'm just trying to set context. We have, unlike, plastic, as we know, is divided into several resins, right? So we have PET, we have HDP, LDP, etc. The EPR does not follow that, I would say, resin-based categorization, right? It rather says that there are 5 categories based on their physical properties. So it's either rigid plastic, which is equivalent to a PET and HDPE. It's a flexible plastic, which could be a single layer of plastic or multi-layer of plastic itself. There is a multi-layered plastic where you have several layers of plastic, but at least one layer of non-plastic. So at least one layer of paper, at least one layer of metal. And then we have compostable and biodegradable plastic. So in total, we are looking at 5 different categories. Again, important to note is for the first 3 categories, the scope is limited to plastic packaging. But for the later 2, category 4 and 5, it covers products as well. Right? Sorry. And these are the 3 core principles that we have on which, again, Indian EPR is based on these 3 principles. One, brand neutrality, which means if I am company ABC, I do not need to go find ABC labeled packaging and bring it back. I can pick up company DEF, XYZ, etc., etc. So it is brand neutral. But I have to ensure that it is category specific. I can't be putting category 3 on the market and collecting category 1 to fulfill any of these targets. So brand neutral, but category specific. And the third one is it's geography agnostic, which means I could be selling my product in difficult terrain like Himachal or Sikkim or Andaman, right? But I could be fulfilling my targets in areas like Delhi, Mumbai, where much more materials are available and they cost a lot less to reach the recycling facility, right? These are some of the targets. Again, I'm not getting into a lot more detail, but right now we are in the year 26, fiscal year 26-27. So we are supposed to collect 100% of what we put on the market. For this year 26-27, if you look at different categories, for rigid plastic, 70% is the recycling target. For flexible and MLP, it is 50%, and for biodegradable, again, it is 70%. These are the recycling targets for this year. And there are also targets for use of recycled content, incorporating the recycled content back into your product. So, and that's there. And then there's one more target specifically for rigid, that is reuse targets, right? But that's very limited. I mean, if your packaging container is more than 900 ml, or if it is less than 5 liters, that is when it's applicable, and only applicable to rigid packaging reuse targets. Now, this is basically the EPR. I mean, the targets, the scope, the principles that it follows, right? What it is based on. The next question that we were also trying to understand is, if EPR is based on the principle of polluter pays, how much should one pay? And how do we arrive at how much should one pay? And in order to understand how much should the polluter pay, we first need to take a step back and understand how much are we spending. How much does it cost for a city? It could be any city, right? How much does it cost for a city to bring their plastic waste to a recycling facility? So all of us knew we had a portal, a centralized portal, which has now been integrated into the EPR ETP is what they are calling it, and it's a trading platform where you can exchange certificates online. But these are all data from August 2024, cumulative data for the period between March 2022 and August 2024. So we had a total of 41,500 odd PBOs registered, who cumulatively put 23.9 million tons of plastic packaging across all categories on the Indian market, right? Of that, if you look at the kind of the breakup between which stakeholder was putting how much, we had the producers put a total of 15 million metric ton, importers put 2.2, and brand owners put 6.2. Now, if you look at the trend, basically, every stakeholder is using a lot more CAT 2 if you compare it to any other category for that particular stakeholder, right? So the dependence on category 2 plastics, which is flexible plastic, is a lot more when it comes to the idea of packaging. Now, we also looked at the other extreme of how many plastic waste processors do we have, what is the kind of activities they are doing, and eventually the capacity that they have. So we had about these are not really units, number of units, but these are the number of resins in or the kind of categories that, because if you look at these numbers, we had about 2,500 odd PWPs. This is a mix of both mechanical recyclers as well as end of life processors. But if you look at this number is higher, and that is because one PWP could be dealing with multiple categories. They could be dealing with rigid as well as flexible, and that entry, that is like 2 entries here, and that is why this number is higher, right? And these numbers do not add up to this number, right? That, and the reason for that is something that I was explaining. But if you look at the amount that we put and the total processing capacity, we are very close, right? But just look at of this entire processing capacity, only 10 million metric ton is dedicated to mechanical recycling, which is, I mean, you could look at it at these are the only facilities who can generate recycling certificates. Because again, Indian EPR is, I would say, advanced to a lot, if you compare it to other EPR systems, especially in Southeast Asia, where we clearly distinguished between mechanical recycling and end of life disposal. So your recycling targets cannot be met if you are burning your plastic in a waste to energy plant, right? That distinction was very clearly stated in the 22 notification. So if I have, let's say, 100 tons of recycling target, those recycling targets can only be met by purchasing EPR certificates from these facilities, right? Again, let me give you an example. I put out a total of 200 metric tons, and I have a 50% recycling target. So 50% is 100 tons. I have to ensure that I get my recycling certificates from these players, right? The remaining 100 tons are not recycling certificates. They are end of life disposal certificates, which I have to procure from the end of life players or the plastic waste processors. And that is how my total compliance of 200 tons, where I am saying 100 tons I have done through mechanical recycling, 100 tons I have done through end of life, and I have not disposed of anything in a dump site or in the river or in the drain. Right? That was the whole idea. Now, if I'm also mindful of the time. If I just give you a snapshot of what the recycling targets, category-wise recycling targets were in the year 2024, and compare them to what our recycling capacity was as a nation, then we were good in category 1, right? We were putting out, I mean, the recycling targets were close to 3 million tons, but our capacity to recycle them was 5.5 million tons. Category 2 is where we were deficient. We were putting out, or our recycling target was close to 5 million tons, but our recycling capacity was only 3.7 million tons. Category 3, again, this is a problematic plastic. I know it's important, but at the end of its life, by the time it reaches the end of its life, it becomes problematic because there are no buyers, right? Urban local bodies struggle to store them in their material recovery facilities. There's no offtake, right? And even if people do take it away, then there are no buyers at the end of its life, even if they make products out of it. And then category 4, this is again something that has been pushed a lot. This is compostable plastic. The problem is that we are putting a lot of these materials into the market currently, but these can only be processed under industrial composting conditions. And guess what? We don't have any in the country, right? Zero. So we are putting them in the market. What they are doing is they are also compromising the recyclability of conventional traditional plastics, right? Because they absolutely have nowhere to go. Now, this is this notification. It was not really a notification. It was kind of a circular. This came sometime in 2025, where what we did is we took a step back, right? And these two slides are connected. Because we did not have the capacity to fulfill our recycling targets, CPCB took a step back and said that, okay, your recycling targets can now be met by purchasing end of life certificates. And they put a conversion factor, which was 1 to 1:5, which means if I have a target of 100 tons, right, instead of procuring certificates equivalent to 100 tons, I can just procure end of life certificates, which is equivalent to 150 tons, and I can fulfill my targets. So what started out as, a celebration, upholding the waste hierarchy, we had to take a step back and I mean, right now, if you look at this, it says that standard provisions apply thereafter, but there has been no communication from the regulators after this notice was put out, and other people on the panel and speakers can confirm whether this is what we are following right now. But I will stop here, and I will leave you with two thoughts again, because I want people to understand this. EPR can only be built when we understand our value chain. That is the first takeaway that I want you to leave with, or live with. And the second one is in order to understand how much should a polluter pay, we need to understand how much are we spending in our cities, because cities run on public money, right? So that also is something that we will dive into when Tribhuvan is speaking. So thank you. And Atin.
Thank you so much, Siddharth. So before I invite Dr. Okay. So before I invite the second co-author, or let me say the first co-author, because it is Tribhuvan first and then Siddharth, as it features in the report as well, we would like to do a formal release of the report, if I may request both the authors, Prachi, Swati, Harshad, Dinesh, to join us please on the stage and can take a quick photo with the printed copy of the reports, and then I can introduce Tribhuvan and he can present the findings of the report. Is that okay? Can I have? So we can come over here? Yes. Stand in the front. Come on. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so let me very briefly introduce Dr. Tribhuvan, and then I will leave in with his presentation. I hope it is visible here. Yes. Okay. So I'm so sorry. What did I do? Yeah. Okay. So Dr. Tribhuvan Bist is an environmental engineer and researcher specializing in solid waste management, plastic pollution, marine litter, circular economy, and environmental policy. He is currently a deputy program manager at the Center for Science and Environment, where he works on research, policy development, and capacity building for sustainable waste management and plastic pollution. He holds a PhD in environmental engineering from IIT Delhi and has published 7 peer-reviewed papers in international journal and presented his research at 4 international conferences. Thank you so much, DB. Come over.
So, good morning, everyone. So, this report, Policy, Practice, and Plastic, Cost of Managing Plastic Waste in Indian Cities, the study was done way back in 2024. But due to some certain reasons, we were not able to make it publicly available. But finally, we are doing so. But the good thing is, even after 2 years, the findings of this report still holds true and they are relevant till date. Right? So why actually we did this study? So as Siddharth mentioned, in the previous 2 reports, we had few answers to the EPR. One of the answer was that how much the credit pays. Like what are the current prevailing market rates at which the credits were trading? So when we look at the credit rates, we could clearly see that they are not enough. So this was our second question which we wanted to answer. Is the credit rate that is currently trading in the market, is it enough or not? For that, we needed an answer to another question. That is, how much does it cost to manage plastic packaging waste in Indian cities? And the answer to this was something we wanted to know. And this answer would vary city by city because Indian has such a diverse geography. We have hills, we have plains, we have coastal areas, then we have island setting. So this will vary. So the next important question about the geographic agnostic feature of this of the EPR. Now, since the cost is varying so much, then should EPR be geographic agnostic? Right. So these were the questions that we wanted to answer through our report. And the objective were, we wanted to put some real numbers on the cost of managing dry waste and plastic packaging waste. Then we also wanted to evaluate the actual cost versus how much EPR credit is paying. Then we wanted to highlight the regional challenges because if casually speaking, we would know that the cost of managing solid waste management in a city like peri-urban area like Delhi, Pune, or Indore would be very different to that of a city, say Dharamshala, or say island setting like Port Blair. But what we do not know is by how much percentage, or by how much, what is the magnitude of the difference. We also wanted to highlight that. And finally, we wanted to put some recommendation which could kind of bridge the gap where EPR is currently lacking. So moving on to the scope of the study, first was the geographic scope. So we handpicked these 5 cities to represent diverse Indian geography. Indore, probably one of the best city in managing solid waste management. Pune has the largest informal sector integration, and it is also one of comparable to Indore in terms of solid waste management. Dharamshala, it represents the hilly region. Then Goa, we got the data for the entire state, but it's a coastal state. So Goa was there. Then Sri Vijayapuram or Port Blair, now it is renamed. So Port Blair or Sri Vijayapuram represents an island setting. Then was the financial scope. We looked the entire value chain of the solid waste management, which include collection, transportation, including primary and secondary, then pre-processing, and finally the disposal thing. From the policy angle, we checked at the alignment, the EPR credit rates alignment with the actual cost, whether EPR is providing any incentive for sustainability, or and then finally the implementation gaps. So we collected data using field survey, stakeholder interviews, and operational data. So we are very thankful to people and organizations who have kind of helped us to gather the data. We have Mayank from Waste Warrior. They provide us data for Dharamshala. We have Harshad from Swachh. They provided data for Pune. And then we have I would like to thank municipalities of Indore and Sri Vijayapuram, for which they provide us the data, and GWMC for Goa. So the methodology was fairly simple. We looked at 6 cost angles, that is labor cost, equipment cost, operational cost, infrastructure cost, transportation cost, and health and safety cost, which by the way is not included in any of the model except that of Pune, right? So in the primary, apart from the infrastructure cost, all the other costs were catered to. Then in secondary collection, all the 6 costs, similarly with MRF. And finally, for the disposal, only the cost to transport RDF from your material recovery facility to the co-processing plant was considered. Now, while calculating, there are 2 types of cost. First is the quantifiable direct cost, and second is the indirect cost. Direct cost is quantifiable cost, and they have immediate financial burden, right? Indirect cost, they are hard to quantify, and they have long-term environmental impacts. So in this entire report, we only looked at the direct cost. We did not consider the indirect cost, that is the environmental, the cost to the environment if we mismanage the solid waste. That was not considered. So just to give you an idea how the the cost was calculated for each of the value chain. For the sample primary collection cost, this is a hypothetical example. Suppose the total solid waste generation is 365,000 metric tons. Then we checked at all the cost component: labor cost, equipment cost, transportation cost. From that, we got the total primary collection cost. And from that, dividing that by total cost, we get per kg cost. This similar process was followed for your secondary collection, your MRF pre-processing, and for disposal, only the transportation cost was considered. So once we get this all numbers, so this is how we can get the range for any city. We'll have a lower bound. In this hypothetical case, that is 3.77, and we'll have an upper bound, that is 5.17 in this hypothetical case. We'll look at the real numbers for the cities going forward. But let us first understand how solid waste is managed in all these cities. First, Indore. In this, the solid waste, in this, the municipal solid waste is collected from household in a segregated manner through primary collection, and then it is transferred to the garbage transfer station, or you can simply say transfer station. From there, secondary collection happens, and wet waste is processed. Wet waste is transported to the wet waste processing plant, and dry waste is transported to the material recovery facility. From the material recovery facility, the recyclables are channelized to the recyclers. The non-recyclable portion is channelized to the co-processing plant, and the rejects is to the dump sites. So this is the entire value chain for Indore, and it will more or less remain same for each of the city that is there. I'll only highlight the differences in other thing. So in Pune, as I said, it has one of the largest waste picker integration. So waste pickers are kind of involved in door-to-door collection. Right at the door-to-door collection, they segregate the plastics that are valuable, and they directly channelized it to the recycler through scrap shop, then to small aggregated, then to the large aggregator, and finally. Rest of the value chain remains similar as that of Indore. For Goa, we have 3 models that is going on in the entire state, and the models only differ. The value chain remains the same, but the only differentiating point is where GWMC plays a part. So the first model is prevalent in 30 to 35 local bodies, right? In this, the local bodies does all the primary collection, after which GWMC take care of the rest, right? In the second model, it is prevalent to the panchayats in Goa. In this, the panchayats do all the door-to-door collection, and then they keep the collected waste into a storage facility or a mini MRF, from where the GWMC vehicle comes and they collect the waste, and then they transport it to their integrated solid waste management facility, and then rest processing happens. The third model, it is prevalent to the major urban local bodies in Goa. In this, the urban local bodies does everything from primary collection to everything. GWMC just helps in transporting the non-recyclable waste from the MRF till the co-processing plant. In Dharamshala, so there's no secondary collection, and Waste Warrior is doing collection over there. So they do collection twice every week, and it is done only for dry waste. After it is collected, it is directly taken to the MRF, and then the usual thing happens. In Sri Vijayapuram, again, the value chain is same. It's just that there's no secondary transfer station. There's no transfer station. The waste from the household is directly transported to the your processing facility. So these are the costs for each city for primary collection, secondary collection, MRF, and RDF transportation. Now just have a look at these numbers. If you see Indore and Pune, they are almost very similar in terms of the overall cost, right? If we compare Goa to that of Indore, it is almost 2 times, 1.5 to 2 times costlier. Now just connect this. As the topography changes, Indore, urban area, right, plains, everything, the cost was 5.128 rupees. Now, as we transfer to a coastal setting, Goa, the cost rise by almost 1.5 to 2 times. And then when we go to a hilly terrain like Dharamshala, the cost is almost 3 times that of Indore. And when we talk about Sri Vijayapuram, the island setting, the cost is almost 5 times that of Indore. So now you can see what difference the geography makes on the cost. And our APR is geographic agnostic, right? So now this is the cost of dry waste, but we need to isolate the cost of plastic packaging waste from this dry waste. Now in dry waste, we'll have different components. We'll have plastic, we'll have rubber, we'll have glass, we'll have metals, we'll have textile, various other things. Of all the materials that are there in dry waste, plastic waste cost a bit higher as compared to other dry waste. Why so? First, it occupies more space, right? It takes up more space, which increases the transportation cost. Then the collection time is also higher because due to the nature of the plastic. Then it requires greater effort to sort and clean. They comes in variety of forms. You have PET, you have HDP, LDP, PP, you have different kind of. Then most of the plastics have very low resale value apart from HDP, PET, right? And then it is also prone to scattering and relittering. So we got the dry waste cost for each city, right? We got the range. So now how we arrived at plastic packaging cost category wise. We have the dry waste. Let's take an example of Indore. 5.1 rupees was of Indore, the lower bound. Then we multiplied it with the adjustment factor. Adjustment factor, why? Because as we know, the plastic cost a bit higher than other dry waste. So adjustment factor was multiplied. The entire methodology can be found in the report. After that, we multiplied with what is the percentage of plastic in the overall dry waste of Indore. And that is 22%. So we multiplied with the 0.22. And then in the plastic that is there, how much is plastic packaging? That is 46%. That is how we arrived at the plastic packaging cost. Now we also have to arrive at the category-wise plastic packaging cost. How do we do that? For category 1, we multiplied with 0.2, category 2, 1.25, and category 3, 2.7. And why did we multiply with these numbers? We'll see in coming slide. So finally, for category-wise cost, you can see. And again, it is very relevant that as the terrain becomes difficult, as the geography becomes difficult, the cost is becoming higher and higher, as you can see for category 1, 2, and 3. Right? So now we know how much it costs to manage plastic packaging waste in all these cities. We also know what is the current prevailing EPR market rates. These rates are actually, we did the study in 2024. So these rates are of 2024. Now the situation has evolved, but we'll also see that. So in that, if we compare what it cost versus what EPR is paying. For category 1, if we see, almost Indore, Pune, Goa is paying more than 100%. However, Sri Vijayapuram and Dharamshala, the coverage is only 68 to 91%. But was category 1 ever an issue? I mean, category 1 has value. It pays. So it will find its way to a MRF or to a recycler, right? But the more problematic things are category 2 and category 3. So what happens to category 2? Now we see even Indore is not able to, recover the 100% of the cost. It is only 60%. Let alone if we go to Sri Vijayapuram, it's only 16%. Only 16%. And we say EPR is based on a polluter pay principle. Dharamshala is only 22% only. This is category 2. And the most problematic category is yet to come. That is category 3. Indore, the best example in this country, can recover only 34% of the cost. Dharamshala, only 13%. And Sri Vijayapuram, only 10%. So now you can see what is the magnitude of difference the geography does and how a market-driven thing. Now, at this point of time, this EPR was a market-driven thing. Right. So it was kind of a race to bottom. If I am a PBO, the one plastic waste processor or the co-processing plant, whosoever give me the lowest amount, I'll say, okay, I'll purchase credit from you. And this is how the credit trading was done. And it was the race to bottom. So this was the case. Now, CPCB recognized this thing. Though they didn't intervene on the cost part, like the trading part, they set a range that for category 1, the credit should be traded within a certain range. Category 2, certain range. Category 3, certain range. And how did they arrive at this range? Is through environmental compensation. So CPCB said certain assumptions. So the cost of collection and transportation is 2,000 rupees per ton. That is 2 rupees per kg. We just saw how much it costs. For setting up an MRF, they have assumed that it's 7 crore rupees for 100 TPD facility. That is the setting up an MRF. And for a life period of 15 years, they said 150 rupees per ton. That is only 15 paisa per kg. And we saw what it actually cost. Setting up an RDF facility, similarly, only 27 paisa per kg. And for operation and maintenance of RDF facility, for operating, they said 1.2 rupees per kg. And for transportation of RDF, they said only 30 paisa per kg. And mind you, we do not have a co-processing plant in each state. There are cities where the waste has to travel 400, 500, 600 kilometers. In case of in case of Shri Vijaypuram, if you want that your non-recyclable waste should be processed in co-processing plant, it has to travel 1,200 kilometers. 1,200 kilometers, and that too by sea. Right? So this raises two questions. First question is, are these assumptions right, or they are at a very lower end? Because based on this, all the EC numbers are derived. Second, if we are considering operation and maintenance of RDF facility, then why are we not considering operation and maintenance of MRF facility? Right? These two questions. I'll leave them for you to think through. So now they came up with something. So they said category 1, 2, 3. They mentioned some ratio. How they arrived at this ratio, I'm not sure. It has not been mentioned in the report as well. But yeah, generation factor. Category 1 has a generation factor of 5. Category 2, 8. Category 3, 2. Which essentially means whatever plastic packaging is made, highest plastic packaging percentage is of that of category 2. Then category 1. And then category 3. I mean, category 3 is the lowest. So availability factor ratio at disposal point. At the dump site, you could say, right? Category 1, since it is not a problem, because it has value, it will find its way. So it has only 1. For category 2, the availability factor is 10. For category 3, availability factor is 5.5. Then they did a ratio, and then finally, when you see the fifth column, category 1.2, category 2, 1.25, category 3, 2.7. This is where I took these number and multiplied it. If you now can recollect back how we arrived at particular plastic packaging category rates, right? So if you remember this, it all summed to around 4,000, right? CPCB said 50% will be borne by the PBOs, 50% will be borne by the ULB. So 2,000 is, is the liability of the PBOs. Now, CPCB said, since we want the environmental compensation to act as a deterrent. So this 2,000 will be multiplied by 2.5 times. So that becomes 5,000, right? Now this 400, 2,500 and 5,400, they took a half of 5,000, not sure why, but 2,500 plus 400, 2,900 for category 1. Category 2, similarly 5,000, category 3, 7,900. Now, how the price was set? They said of this EC, 30% will be the lower bound and 100% of this will be the higher bound. So 30% of 2,900 is some, if we 2.9 rupees, if we say per kg is somewhat 0.87, and 100% is 2.9 rupees. So this is the range how they calculated. So if we see what the market was actually paying, it's a very huge improvement what CPCB has actually recommended, right? And as of today, the credits are being traded somewhere near or closer to the lower bound of what CPCB has recommended. Like for category 1, lower bound is 0.87. Category 2, it's 1.5. And category 3 is 2.37. But now coming back to the question, CPCB has revised it, but still, does it solve our problem? Is the producer really paying for this? We need to do a comparison. Now, for all of the cities, for category 1, we are recovering more than 100%. Again, category 1 is not my problem. It is not anyone's problem. It is going to handle itself. When we come to category 2, you see, Indore and Pune, they are recovering more than 100%. Good. But Goa, second, third model, and when we go to challenging geographies, Dharamshala is able to recover only 43%, and Vijayapuram only 33%. That is category 2. What about category 3? In category 3, Pune is not able to recover 100%. It's only 87%. And when we talk about Dharamshala, it's 32%, and Shri Vijayapuram, it's only 24%. So we have improved, but we are not where we actually should be at this point of time. And so this is one of the aim of EPR, right? But EPR is not only about paying for waste management. It is also about forcing design changes, right? So how do we actually push brands to make design changes in their packaging to more sustainable one? So at the first place, we need to understand why brands use material like MLP at the very first place. One of the major reason is the cost, right? MLP is often cheaper for as a packaging option for brands compared to more sustainable alternatives. This we all agree, right? MLP is cheaper as a packaging option as compared to sustainable alternatives that are available in the market, right? So as long as using difficult or hard to recycle packaging remains cheaper than the more sustainable alternatives, brands do not have any motive to make design changes in their packaging, right? So this is where EPR can play an important role. The EPR cost, the credit cost of hard to recycle material should be brought up to a point such that for brands it make financially viable or financially attractive to shift to more sustainable packaging option as compared to hard to recycle material. Only then will the brand shift from MLP or the hard to recycle material to a more sustainable alternatives. Now, after this, we have some key findings. First is the data disclosure. So again, I mean, you would hardly find any ULB disclosing data related to the cost of solid waste management. And in most of the cases, even the ULB does not know how much it costs for them to manage the solid waste, because their budget is more of sanitation budget. They do not know the exact cost for solid waste management. And I was thankful that I got some meaningful connection, and thankful to people that are there who provided us with the data, which is why the study was possible. Second is plastic reclassification. Now, in the EC, we saw that category 3 generation is very less. There was this subtle change in the definition, or I would say that brands have found a way around. Earlier, the definition was MLP, any material that have one layer of plastic and one non-layer of plastic, one or more, multiple layer of non-layer of plastic. So your chips packet, your biscuit packets, everything fall into category 3. But now what has been done is that there's one layer of plastic, and then brands are coating aluminum paints, which will have the same barrier properties. But according to the definition, now they are not into category 3, but they are into category 2, which is the reason, if you reflect back to Siddharth's presentation, category 2 quantity was the highest. Even in the EC, you see that category 2 generation is very high. But with this small workaround, what the brands are able to do, they are able to comply at much cheaper cost, because now your chips packet, your biscuit packet, everything falls in category 2, not category 3, right? So this plastic reclassification. Then low credit rates. We have seen even the market trading rates, and even if we follow the CPCB trading rates, still the credit rates are very low, especially for category 2 and category 3 plastic. Then it's rate inequalities. We have seen how much the rate changes as the geography changes, with the difference being 5 times from Indore to Sri Vijayapuram. So again, the geographic agnostic thing. And currently, as Siddharth mentioned, there are only 2 entities that could actually generate credits. First is the plastic waste processors, that is our recyclers, right? They can generate recycling certificate. Second is our end of life processes, that is the co-processing plant. Apart from that, no one can generate, right? So the benefit is limited to only these 2 entities only. But who comes to your house and collect your waste? Right? Either it is the ULB. Who is making sure that all the valuable plastic reaches an MRF or an recycler? The informal sector. Both parties are being left out of the EPR. With amendments in the EPR, ULB can now register as a PWP, and we have one speaker who will be talking about this. So ULB is included now in the EPR, but what about the informal sector? India boasts about its recycling capacity, right? But who is the major player because of which that recycling capacity we have reached? It's the informal sector. They are still left behind. So these were the key findings. So moving to the recommendation, we need to disclose the waste management costs. This dilution of MLP needs to be reversed, else brand will comply with much cheaper cost, right? Then we need to revise EPR credit rates, especially for category 2 and category 3. Then we need to have some localized EPR framework. We need to expand the benefit of EPR to include the major players, the urban local bodies, which are somehow are included, but not to that level. And then also the informal sector. So this geographic agnostic thing is not something that only we are saying. It has a legal premise also, right? So there was this one case, Suleiman and others versus Union of India. So the petitioner and the state board flagged that EPR credit rate is geographic neutral. Like a brand owner is selling in Dharamshala, but they could buy EPR credits from a processor in Delhi. If a processor is based in Dharamshala, the cost would be higher, processing cost. If it is based in Delhi, cost would be lower, right? So it doesn't matter. So, and with no way to verify how much plastic packaging is actually entering the Himachal Pradesh, right? So what the court directed, the High Court directed, and CPCB also intervened. CPCB directed to ensure the brand owners to report the plastic packaging they are selling in the state, the Himachal Pradesh, so that their EPR obligation is fulfilled within the state itself and not anywhere in the country. And also, PBOs and waste management agencies were separately told to prioritize Himachal-based processors over the cheaper out of station. So this entire thing has a legal premise also. So I would like to highlight 2 recommendations that we have made. Now, first is the EPR credit rate adjustment process. Now, since we have such diverse geography, we first need to identify the clusters, like done in the study. We need to have coastal, we need to have, we have a very huge coastline, we have 2 offshore islands, we have hilly regions, we have peri-urban areas, right? Then we need to conduct periodic assessment to, to analyze how much it costs to manage your entire solid waste management and plastic packaging waste in that geographic cluster. Then we need to apply a weightage factor and then finally calculate the adjusted rate. Now let us try to understand with an example. Suppose we take a cluster such as a mountainous region, right? We have Northeast, we have Dharamshala, we have Mussoorie and all. So in that cluster, let's say Mussoorie has the lowest cost, that is 10 rupees. So that would serve as a base. Now, Himachal Pradesh, we see through our periodic assessment that it costs 30% higher than the base value. So what we'll do is we'll add this base cost 10 rupees plus that 30%. So that would come to around 13 rupees. So EPR credit cost for that for Dharamshala will be 13 rupees for MLP, not 10 rupees. But this creates a problem. I am a brand. Since I'm getting credits at a much cheaper rate somewhere else, so I should purchase there or there, right? Why should I give more money, right? For this, we need to have a localized EPR framework. So we have come up with this formula where you can see localized obligation percentage is basically how much a PBO should purchase from the state or a city where it is placing its plastic packaging, right? Let's take an example of Sri Vijayapuram. Suppose the average regional cost is 12,000 tons. National average is 6,000 rupees per tons, and maximum regional cost. Since Sri Vijayapuram is an island setting, so only other island setting is Lakshadweep. Let's assume in Lakshadweep it is coming 15,000. So when we put everything in the formula, the LOP, localized obligation, comes out to 67%. Which means PBO must purchase 67% of EPR credits from plastic waste processors in Sri Vijayapuram. Now, if this is mandated, then they will have to comply with it. If they are placing 100 tons of plastic in Sri Vijayapuram, they will have to purchase 67 tons of credits, 67 credits from there only, right? Now, as we have taken example of Sri Vijayapuram knowingly, because Sri Vijayapuram does not have any plastic waste processor. So now what do we do? If we do not have any plastic waste processor in that particular state or city, then we have a fallback mechanism. And that fallback mechanism is the waste of Shri Vijayapuram, especially the recyclable waste, is finally ending up with a recycler. It is traveling that 1200 kilometers through the sea, reaching the port. After that, again, it is covering distance to reach to the recyclers. But there is some plastic waste processor that is actually processing their waste. So you will have to purchase the credit from that plastic waste processor. Right. So these are the two major highlights I wanted to do. Now, again, from where we started, right? We set out to have to answer 4 questions. First, what does it cost? Now we know. The range is huge. You see the range start from 5 rupees and it goes till 31 rupees. Right. What do credit pay? Very less. Very, very less. Is it enough? No. It, for hard to recycle category 3, the range is only 10 to 34% is recovered. And should EPR be geographic agnostic? Absolutely no. Because then we are punishing states or cities for being in a hard terrain, because they didn't choose to be in a hard terrain. They were in a hard terrain, and then we are punishing them that because you are in a hard terrain, no matter what, but EPR credit will pay you this enough only. Right? So yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Tribhuvan. So we actually thought of doing a little longer Q&A session, but as you all know, we started late because of the traffic and other factors. So we have little time, but since this is basically at the epicenter of this event, the 2 presentation made by Siddhartha and Tribhuvan, and also Swati is here as a keynote speaker. So if you have any questions, we can take it quickly and spare some 5-7 minutes. I checked the virtual platform. We actually requested the participants to ask questions if they have any. And then we get to the next segment with Prachi, Madhukar, and others, where basically we'll now intersect the EPR regime into components and see what are the key learnings. So if you have any questions, just raise your hand and then, okay.
Thank you, Tribhuvan, for this very important work. I think, I don't know if you want to answer this, but just a comment that where do we take this report and where do we want to take these very important findings? And if I may ask, like, do you see some openness from, say, the ministerial and regulatory agencies to take this very important feedback into account? And, because this is really important, we've really seen like the very important gaps that have been there to 5 to 6 years of EPR implementation. So what do we do this with this very important report and work now?
I mean, it's a tough question. So basically, I won't answer directly, but we did this report in 2024 and we are putting it in public today. It's 2 years. So I think you got the answer. And also, if we talk about the Indian EPR, we were just analyzing EPR in the South Asian and Pacific region, and we found out that Indian EPR is one of the most evolved EPR in the entire South Asian countries. I would also say that it is even better than some developed countries like Japan and South Korea, especially the eco-modulation that we have introduced. But where we are lacking is the implementation part. Is something that we are lacking, right?
Just to add, so what Tribhuvan presented started with this one question that we were asking: how much does it cost? And this is a product of 4 years. It's a research product that took 4 years to come out, right? Now, this is a very important question, Swati, because it shouldn't stop at this, right? And me and Tribhuvan have had several rounds of discussions, obviously, while we were working, and also how do we now take it ahead? EC is where that gap is, because as per the law, the EC can be revisited every 6 months, and that is exactly why we have targeted the EC. Right now, with what we have been able to gather, we are also working with close to 80 cities now, although not in a very, not a deep dive engagement, but we will be collecting similar data from all these cities so that we can strengthen this evidence and take it back to the policymakers. We don't want to change the EPR policy. We have a very good policy, like Tribhuvan mentioned. Our policy is very robust, right? Now, how do we make sure that the money flows from the right source, goes to where it belongs, and goes to people who are actually putting in the hard work? We don't want the policy to change, but we do realize and recognize that the EC is subject to change as per the law. So can we change the EC for category 2? Can we revisit the EC for category 3? Can we take into consideration geography, agnosticity, and revisit that when it comes to difficult geographies and difficult packaging formats? That is where we want to, I think, press the pedal now.
Two quick. One is, as a part of the research, were you able to see whether the implementation of EPR has led to an actual increase in any collection, not just capacity, but actual, processing of plastics over a period of time, in order to justify, say, what you're saying, ki, आगे चल के EPR की वजह से recycling बढ़ेगा? Have we noticed that trend? Is one part, and the second is slightly technical and easier, perhaps. Have you considered the cost of the superstructure of solid waste management? So IEC costs, for example, some cities like, say, PCMC spend 50 crores a year just for IEC in order to get the material in the first place. And that's completely separate contract. So have you considered that? And what about the externalized costs within the recycling sector? Before, so all the social welfare, social security, people sleeping in processing plants, that allows for recycling to happen and the certificate to be generated.
Yeah.
And should these two be considered?
Yeah, so Now, for your first question, we have a speaker with us. I think she'll be able to better tell how the recycling thing has increased or not, or whether what differences can we see on the ground. For your second part, no, we did not consider the cost of the IEC, because what like we defined in the scope of our work, we only took the cost that maybe you could say a ULB spends to manage the entire solid waste management. In that, IEC is definitely one of the biggest component, but that is not included in that. Plus, we only took the direct cost that is there. So any externalities, any indirect cost is something that we were not able to quantify exactly. Yeah. So. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Indrani. Thank you for those presentations and all the research that you've done. For people like me, it has been a godsend, CSE's research. I have two questions. One is the discrepancy in this EPR cost. Who is taking that in? Is that urban local bodies? And the second question is, where does PROs come into the picture? Because they're not part of the CPCB's registration system, and should they be?
Yeah. So, sorry, I missed your first question.
No, the discrepancy in the cost.
Yeah,
Who
the
is
discrepancy in cost. So, as far as I can understand, you are asking the gap that is there. Who is paying for that?
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
It's you that is paying. It's me that is paying. It's the
technically-
taxpayer that is paying.
technically the municipalities?
Yeah. It is with the municipalities and all them. And the second question. I mean, Siddharth, if you remember, I am bad with remembering things.
Yes, sorry, PROs. Yeah.
So, across the world, EPR are built on different ideas. How India's EPR is built is PRO is not in the regulatory picture. Right. So we do not have like if you see in Africa, PRO is a very prominent player in their EPR system, because they are the one who are driving all the collection. Then they are the one who is getting credits. They are the one who is generating credits. They are the one who is getting money, and they are channelizing it to the entire value chain. However, in India, PRO does not has that kind of role. They are much more about connecting the brands with the the producers, importers, or the brand owners with the plastic waste processor or the end of life processor to facilitate entire process of credit trading, and also all the compliances that comes with it in the CPCP portal. Yeah. So
this EPR is, as you said, the brand, when the EPR says about the brand neutral and geography neutral. Do you also come across, in this process, these recyclers, importing plastic from overseas, other countries. So how does it, this EPR is effective for the Indian context? That's one thing. The other thing is that the packaging material, may not be the scope of your study. You have, done the very cost analysis about the recycling of the plastic waste, Is there any idea about what is the production of this packaging material? I mean, see what the cost of production of the packaging material and the recycling of this. You have done the recycling cost of the recycling.
So we have not actually calculated the cost of recycling. Recycling is entirely different thing. What we have done is we have calculated the cost of managing plastic waste, or you could say solid waste, from the moment it has been getting collected from your household till the time it reaches the doorstep of a recycler or a co-processing plant. This is the cost what we have calculated. Now, moving to your first question, that is, if recyclers import the plastic waste and then make, then fulfill their obligation. So EPR is also applicable on the importers as well. So it's producers, importers, and the brand owners. So if anyone is importing plastic packaging waste, they also comes under the umbrella of the EPR. And Siddharth, if you would like to add.
No, I mean, imports are much more skewed towards rigid category of plastic for which we have surplus capacity in the country. When we import plastic waste, usually, I mean, the idea is that we get cleaner material because we are not segregating back in our own country. Right, so it's much more easier to procure higher quality material at a lower price, and also, you know, utilize your surplus capacity largely limited to category 1. But I'm not saying that category 2, category 3 does not get imported into the country. वो भी होता है, but at a lesser volumes.
Mayank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Compromised. Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
last question.
Yeah, last question.
We'll have one more round of Q&A.
Yeah. A quick one. So basically, we have talked about the ULBs here. Have you also have any insights on the panchayat level, like how they are linked to the EPR? Because where we work, Uttarakhand, Himachal, even the nodal agency for responsible for waste collection processing is not defined clearly. So any insights on the panchayat and the village side of it, like how that is being incorporated under the EPR and the 2024 rules?
I mean, EPR for village or panchayat level is not very different. I mean, EPR is same for everyone. But in panchayat scheme of things, the cost will be higher because you'll have dispersed houses, and then you can't, not every household is accessible by a public, by a transport, and you'll have to go barefoot with a cart or something like that. So by the way, he is from Waste Warrior only. So the Dharamshala cost that we have included in this report is for you know, the panchayat and the rural areas only, as you very well know that. So even if we see the cost in Dharamshala only, in the urban area, you could say not the panchayat level, but more towards the city side, the cost again would vary. But how much would that cost vary? That is something we do not have an answer to at this point of time, because we got the data only from you. So panchayat level is something, the EPR thing is same, but the cost would vary.
Yeah, so I think within the city level also, there will be a major variation when it comes
Definitely,
to
it would be a major
rural
variation.
and urban
Yeah.
areas.
Okay, thank you. Good to see the questions flowing. I can see a few questions from the virtual participants as well. So I just wanted to let Ashish Vaishnav, Vishnu Mohan, and Krunal know that we'll take your questions after we are through with the presentations from Prachi and Madhukar. I'm not sure whether Madhukar is with us, whether he has joined. So let me take the discussion forward and introduce Prachi and leave her the floor. So Prachi Giria is a business development manager at Landbell Green Forest Solutions India, where she leads strategic partnerships and sustainability initiatives in extended producer responsibility and the circular economy. With a background in the impact sector, she has worked with leading nonprofits, including WWF India and the Nudge, driving collaborations across climate, livelihoods, and social impact. She is passionate about building partnerships that accelerate the transition to a more circular and sustainable future. Thank you so much, Prachi, for joining us today. Before I leave the floor to Prachi, for all of us, Prachi and her organization is into auditing the facilities where plastics are recycled or processed. And these organizations are actually authorized by the respective pollution control boards or pollution control committees. So she's a very critical player in this whole EPR regime. So over to you, Prachi.
Yeah. Yeah.
Windows. Yes.
Just a minute. The laptop change. Which one?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity, CSE team. Congratulations on the report launch and really, really great work done. I had a chance to go through the report. It's commendable the work that the team has put in. Great. So, hi everyone. Good morning. I am Prachi. I'm a part of the business development team at Landbill Green Forest Solutions. Landbill Green Forest Solutions is a waste management advisory. We work across EPR compliance. Like Sir mentioned, we have done waste audits. We've done recycler audits as well. We act as a waste management consultancy and advisory for PBOs. So today what we've already covered is, the basics and the fundamentals of EPR. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time taking you through the same again. However, just a glimpse of it, as you can see that this is what the EPR ecosystem looks like. At the ground level, we have collection, segregation, sorting of waste, after which the different materials sort of goes through different pathways. So some go through co-processing, while recyclable material goes through recycling plants. And at the compliance end, we have PBOs and PWPs or waste management agencies, which have obligations to sort of register, share their action plans, collect, treat, report, and document. Now, this is also the evolution of EPR and plastic packaging EPR in India. We have seen that it has gone through a significant change from first when EPR was introduced in 2016 until now. In the initial stages, we were focusing on registration, implementation, and now we can see a very formal compliance, portal-based compliance, which focuses more on traceability, credits, transactions. Now, before we get to the next slide, today what I wanted to also discuss with all of you and also take you through a few studies that I came across. The idea was to understand different stakeholders in the system and what we're doing. The first stakeholder that we will look at is the consumer, which is all of us. So this is a study, this is a Nielsen IQ study, which was done in early 2025, covering about 1034 consumers in Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, and Kolkata. This was a detailed study. However, I've taken just like 4 data points from there to share with all of you. So in the study, we found out that 85% of the people considered plastic as a major contributor to pollution. They realized how harmful it is for the environment, for their health, and overall ecosystem. While only 54%, only 46% said that they almost always segregate, which means 54% do not always segregate their waste at homes. 81% of the pollution was very curious about sustainable alternatives in terms of packaging, recycled content claims, but still 60% doubted the credibility of those claims. So I think what is very interesting here is how there's a coexistence of curiosity, concerns, but also hesitation from the customers. And there's clearly an awareness to action gap, which can be shaped by many factors like affordability, availability, convenience, trust by the consumers, and also whether they can see the impact of their actions on ground. There was a certain segment of the population which said that why should we even segregate, because when we step out of the house we see litter, we see garbage on the roads, or when the truck comes they will sort of put all the waste in the same truck, so why should we even participate and do our bit if others are not doing it. And the study, so like I said, this is a very brief version of what I've shared here, but they did share, they checked with the population about their views on segregation, sustainability overall, and they also mentioned that how a certain segment and a good chunk of the population was also using sachets, considering and the reasons are very like they are easier when it's when they're traveling, it's easier to use, it's easier to sort of take a trial before buying that rigid packaging, spending more money. However, there was also a lack of clarity on certain aspects, like they were not sure if sachets are recyclable, easily recyclable. Many considered it to be easily recyclable. Many had the confusion between compostable versus recyclability. How are they different? And if they all categories of plastic sort of fall under the same segments. So why am I sharing this with you is to sort of derive a conclusion. Now, this can't be fixed or for the entire Indian population, given also the size of the study. But what we can definitely take away from this is that the issue is not just that if people care, it is whether the system makes the desired behavior easy, credible, and meaningful. Now, what we have, the next 3 slides, I will just take you through the different kind of changes which the brands are sort of bringing in. And these examples are taken from the source, which is a study and an annual report of India Plastics Pact. So the first sort of example that we have in front of us are examples of increased use of recycled content in rigid packaging. We can see products by ITC Limited and how they have sort of increased the recycled content in their packaging between 40 to 50%, while there's also an HUL Vim bottle, which claims to be entirely made from 100% post-consumer recycled PET. So these examples, while these claims are made by the brands, they also sort of shift the conversation, right? Like the conversation just doesn't now remain about collections of plastic or collecting plastic. It also sort of shifts the narrative to availability of a secondary raw material. Or do we have the systems in place where EPR has definitely pushed the accelerator on using recycled content for packaging, but do we have PCR? Do we have good quality, consistent PCR? So these are also the questions which are now emerging as trends / opportunities when we speak about recycled content. Now, what we have is an example where a brand has sort of used citizen engagement and awareness as their next step, where we can see that Zomato has installed 40 smart bins and 60 bins across metro stations in Varanasi and popular locations in Kolkata, urging people to sort of, segregate their waste, discard their waste correctly. And this also sort of takes us through the survey that we had just discussed, that behavior and behavior change is often backed up by infrastructure. So if we want consumers to behave a certain way, or if we want consumers to sort of segregate their waste, it will have to be backed up by infrastructure. An act cannot be done if there's no infrastructure sort of backing it up and available for the consumers. The last example that I want to sort of share with you is at the upstream. So it's about design changes being made by products, so by producers and brand owners, and how they're sort of changing their packaging to ensure that it is a more sustainable version of what they were earlier putting in the market. So here we can see examples of, again, products by ITC, where we can sort of see that there's been an increase in the recyclability of the bottle by changing the components or use of a outer paper as the outer packaging of a product, or even increased use again in PCR for the bottles blister tray. Before I sort of wrap this up, I also wanted to share like a final uh, reasoning behind why I've sort of taken you through these brands and the changes that they've been making, to also understand that EPR has sort of set the foundation, and brands are also beginning to, respond. We also have consumers, as we could see in the study, that they are interested, they are curious, they also want to act, but there is some hesitation. I think it is very, very important to sort of connect these three linkages, and also ensure that now we're building markets and system that does not work in silos, and sort of connect these three efforts which are being made by three stakeholders, which are consumers and brand owners and also the system. Now, I think one area where I also wanted to sort of share my viewpoint was where is EPR headed, and also the examples that we sort of discussed, what are the things which are standing out here. So definitely there's an increased recycled content. However, there's also a limited availability of PCR. The foundation of PCR also, or we can see the backbone of PCR is sort of the informal waste system that we have here in India. And it is also very hard after the plastic has sort of gone through certain contamination or degradation after the first use to get good quality PCR. So while EPR does mandate it for these brands, PBOs, to actually use recycled content, we need to build a demand and supply for PCR for to be able to make this work. Second is increased collection and recycling. This also sort of, I would like to link with the CSE study that we have just gone through, that there are gaps in segregation and recovery, and there's a need to really deeply integrate EPR with the city waste systems, the local systems. But while we're doing that, we need to make sure that it is not agnostic in terms of geography, that we're taking into account different terrains, different cities, how isolated they are, what is the population, how dense is the population, etc. Improve accountability. So we can definitely say that compliance in terms of, it is not just about, purchasing or transaction of credits or certificates. That cannot be enough to sort of see measurable impact. If we want to move towards outcome-based EPR, we definitely need to sort of also ask questions about the physical material flow. That where is the material coming from, where is it going, what is happening inside these recycling facilities, and also what are the outputs of these recycling plants that we're seeing. And finally, enable circular packaging. So definitely packaging is something which is at the upstream level, and when brand owners and producers are sort of taking this call, it is very important for them to keep sustainability at the center of their packaging decisions, because it cannot be done that the effect or the harm that these packaging have at the end of the chain sort of need to have a solution at the start of the chain, at the beginning of the chain, and cannot just be the responsibilities of the downstream players. So design for circularity, reuse, refill, all of these applications, wherever appropriate, should be kept in mind while we are sort of working towards packaging. So with this, I sort of come to the end of my presentation, where I would just like to leave you with thoughts about how segmented or how differently we think about what producers are doing, what consumers are doing, what the system is doing, but also how important it is to sort of ask the right questions, and also ensure that all these three players are sort of working together, not in silos, and working towards the same goal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prachi. Very fresh and very different perspective. So we are about 35 to 40 minutes behind the schedule. We were supposed to be joined by Madhukar from Mysuru City Corporation. But Madhukar is experiencing a very poor internet connectivity in his office. So he's right now traveling to a different location to get better connectivity so that he can connect with us. So let's utilize the time for a quick tea break. We had enough plastics in our brain since the morning. So let's get rid of some of them at least. So we'll be back. It's 11:55. Let's come back to this room by 10 minutes past 12. It's a request in the interest of all of us. Many of you may have commitments in the afternoon. So please step outside. Tea is outside and come back by 10 minutes past 12. Thank you.